recording. So, yes, the big thing I want to bring up that is of note is the rains have started to come into Ukraine. The Russians have missed their window of opportunity if they were looking to try and restart their advances. This window has pretty much gone. Probably also has closed a window for any near future and immediate Belarusian. Pardon me, I'm just going to take a quick drink. That's not going to look good on the video, is it? But this rain has probably now cut off the immediate likelihood that the Belarusians are going to join the war in the imminent future. So if we just play this just over the next week, you will see the problem that the Russians are now going to have to contend with. So you had this bank of rain that came through Ukraine today. And I'll just leave that play on. So the weather in the temperature in Ukraine at the moment, it's round about somewhere between just above zero into maybe round about 8 degrees across the country. In various parts, might be a bit warmer, a bit colder somewhere else. But as you can see, this rain, especially heavy rain in points. But the point is once it falls, is the ground gets wet and it's not going to dry up anytime soon. And this is, unless there's going to be another big spout of dry weather, who knows, next week or something, this is going to basically be the state of play until is it now, maybe late April, early May. So yeah, as you can see, this is significant rain. This is, or how am I reading this? This is next Saturday, so certainly from next Saturday, if not before, is the ground in Ukraine, it's just going to be mud. You're not going to get tanks through that. You're not going to get heavy vehicles through that. This ground is, even before next Saturday, as you can see, those little bits of rain, they'll not have dried out. So the ground is going to be sodden. So the Russians are going to be looking to do any kind of advance. It's going to have to be along paved roads. So just arbitrarily, let's say Kharkov. If the Russians are going to try and make advances around Kharkov, they are going to have to do it along roads, along paved roads, because these fields, this looks like a wooded area, but essentially the countryside is just going to be essentially a bog. Tanks especially will flounder in that. There's already, earlier in March, there were examples where tanks had been abandoned because they had effectively completely, and I mean, the entire thing hadn't disappeared into the mud, but they had basically sunk into the mud, be irretrievable. About heavy vehicles to dig them out. So yeah, unless you've got paved roads, and even then, yeah, there are some decent roads. Just for example, looking at the Kharkov area, but a lot of these roads, that looks like a gravel, potentially paved roads, but you know, these little roads, these are going to be dirt tracks. These are not going to support heavy vehicles whenever they're wet. So that is essentially the window of opportunity for the Russians to do major plays has kind of passed for them, which would also explain why the Russians have very clearly and very noticeably changed their tactics. So the Russians, and they probably should have done it by the end of the first week, but they have recognized that they were too ambitious in the opening moves. These long, winding advances along the highways, along these roads towards Kiev, through Chernigov, and towards Kharkov and around Kharkov, and in the south, it worked to a large degree. But that there's particular reasons why it worked in the south: the quality of the officers, the quality of the commanders, the inability of the Ukrainians to put up effective defenses. The terrain is flat, so Russian air power reigns supreme down here. So, but yeah, the Russians have effectively conceded that the opening stage of the war is past, and they failed their objectives. So, what does this mean? And what are the Russians likely to do for the next month? So, the next month and a half, 2 months, the Russians aren't going to be able to do major plays across Ukraine. Logistics reasons, but also the mud. So, what are we going to be looking at? In the north of Kiev, especially, I do not expect the Russians to make any real major progress here, and I don't expect them to attempt to. What I think this group to the north of Kiev, around Hostomel and up towards the Chernobyl area, I pointed this out in yesterday's stream, but I guess I'll point this out again. This road right past the nuclear power plant, this is the main Russian supply road. Well, one of them. There's two of them, but this is the main one. So if you ever see the footage of the Russian logistics train coming down from Belarus into the north of Ukraine, you'll often see that the Chernobyl power plant is in the background because this is literally the road it goes along. And then if we follow this up through the remains of Pripyat, whereabouts this, because of where it is, like this is the Chernobyl exclusion zone. So the only roads that are really maintained to any degree are the ones going to the power plant. Everything else has essentially been left to decay since disaster in 1986. So on that note, this road here, and then I think there is another road further to the east, but essentially this is the main road. And as you can see, just looking at the tree cover, this isn't a particularly well maintained road. And it is a single lane road. It is a very small road. This is the road that goes all the way up into Belarus, crosses the border here. This is the Belarusian exclusion zone. So as you can see, this is an abandoned town that's been left from 1986. But this that's quite a distance of a road, that because all this is abandoned because of the radioactivity in the area. But that goes all the way up into Belarus. So whenever you consider the Russian logistics train for the north of Kiev has to come all the way down there and rely largely on this road, which is not well maintained, up until basically the power plant, you can sort of see why the Russians have logistics problem. They do have another option here, but this border crossing, but I honestly don't know what the situation is in this area. I don't know if this is held by Ukraine or if it's held by Russia. Because if you look, this road, have a look. Where is Hostomel? Just so I get my bearings there. So this might be controlled by Russia. I don't have. I honestly can't say one way or another. So if the Russians do control this, this is also a second route they can use. But as I was pointing out, stressing a lot yesterday, is these are not big roads. That's not the best image, but somewhere along the line is. It looks like abandoned as well. Is this still the exclusion zone? I'm not too sure, but this road looks to be maintained to some sort of degree, uh, especially since where is the border crossing? Or maybe not. Maybe I'm thinking of somewhere else because that doesn't look like there's really anything apart from a sign at that border crossing at all. So, okay, maybe this is still the exclusion zone. So yeah, maybe even that road as well has not been maintained. So two potentially decaying roads for like you're talking good 10, 20 miles potentially along this very rickety, not well maintained road. That you have to bring down all the supplies. And I know people kind of get a bit tired of me emphasizing this point, but all the troops here, you're going to have tens of thousands of Russian soldiers operating in this area. They need to be fed. They need fuel. They need ammunition. They'll need reinforcements. On top of that, you also have the Ukrainian civilian population in this area. They need to be fed as well. So all of that needs to be supported essentially through these two, potentially even just this one road if the Russians don't actually control this. So any stress on this road, if there's an accident, so just to give you an idea, yeah, as you can see, this is a 2-lane road. You can see the road demarcator there. This is a 2-lane road. If something happens on this, say there's an accident somewhere along the line that needs to be pushed off the road, that closes one end of the road. It all has to go around, adjust for it. I think at some point, no, I think does it transition onto a single lane road at some point? I'm not sure. But yeah, essentially, if there's an ambush on this road, if something happens on this road, if there's a traffic jam on this road, it's going to back up everything all the way back up, all the way back up into Belarus. So if you remember the stories about the 40-kilometer long Russian column coming to Kiev, this is where it came down, and it's since dispersed to other places. But the reason it took so long is because, like I say, if there's an ambush, if something breaks down on this road, if there's an accident on this road, if there is poor traffic management on this road, it will slow everything down all the way back up the road. And then that puts stress on the logistics train that has to come all the way down. The other aspect is, so that main road comes down to here. Here it kind of splits off. So if we follow the main route that's mostly been taken, so just imagine Russian logistics coming down here. Some will go down there as well, but they come down here, down towards Hostomel. So here's Hostomel town, village itself. This Moshun was retaken by the Ukrainian army 4 or 5 days ago. Just bear in mind the terrain. This largely looks like, in fact, we actually even get direction am I looking to? I think Moshun is over in that direction. These bushes kind of frustrate what I was hoping to illustrate here. But I guess at one point is, yeah, as you can see, this is a 2-lane road. It's not a very wide road. So tanks are fairly wide, military vehicles are very wide. So if you imagine you've got hundreds of them coming down this road's going to be very constricted. If there's an ambush on this road, say a tank gets destroyed, that's 1 lane of the road completely out of action until you can remove the wreck off the road. So it's a bit of, okay, I think we might have a bit here. Yeah. So a bit more. So if I'm not mistaken, over there is Moshun, just over here. As you can see, yeah, there are some woods in the area and there's bushes here, but this is open ground. So let's see if we goes up and gets us a bit more of a look. Well, behind these trees over in that direction, I believe, is the town of Moshun. So fairly open ground. Yeah, there are trees and stuff. The Google road thing has kind of illustrated this. This isn't a big river. This should be easy to cross and ford. This is, yeah, you could get troops across that, even just fording across the water itself, I would imagine, because that does not look especially large. So fairly open ground. Ukrainian troops in this town could potentially start directing fire onto this roadway. If they might not see the actual vehicles themselves, but if they hear them, if they get the spot of them, one of them going between the trees, if they've got heavy armaments in here, just put it across into that road. You deny that road. Depending on what the Russian defenses they have along here, if they have any at all, because there was also reports that Ukrainian troops had started to enter Hostomel itself. Either way, Ukrainian elements in this town. This was one of the main supply routes for the Russians, so that is not ideal. Now, there is this road as well, which the Russians can then also transfer supplies down to try and avoid any enemy confrontation here. But then that kind of negates and puts more pressure on the logistics trains, because again, if you take this road out of action and have to put everything down this road, say if there's an ambush on this road, if this road somehow gets blocked or something like that, it just puts more stress. And looking at this car here, this does not look like it's a 2-lane road. This looks like it's a 1-lane road, just going by how much of the road that car is taking up. So yeah, if they, am I? So 2-lane road taken out of action potentially by Ukrainians in this town. Russians have to rely on a 1-lane road here. If there's an ambush, if a car breaks down, if a tank is destroyed, potentially this entire road is now out of action until it can be cleared, and that is going to slow up Russian logistics, support, supplies, reinforcements, everything down to their operations down here, which is not going to be good for the Russians. But saying that, the other thing is I don't think the Russians are looking to do anything here. I think what it appears they have done, not just me thinking, but what I'm hearing, what they've done is these troops are not going to be advancing in the near future. Is they have been told what they are there to do is to keep Ukrainian army units bogged down in this area, draw them away from other fronts, just take a defensive posture, let the Ukrainians attack. Don't keep attacking yourselves. Just bog down as much Ukrainian troops as you can, inflict as much damage as you can upon them, but just keep them bottled up as much as you can. So I think that is probably what the Russians are looking to do. Pardon me, I've got a bit of hiccups. In the northwest of Kiev for the near future. Now we go up to here. This town of Slavuch. I forgive my pronunciation, but Slavutuch. I wouldn't. I'll just call it Slavuch. This town was taken by the Russians today. This is greatly diminished from what I can see, as apparently the Russians have essentially just taken all these small outlying villages, greatly shrunken the Chernigov pocket. So the Russians now control this town, and this is actually quite crucial for what is going to be the developing siege of Chernigov. Because Chernigov, I think, is probably going to be one of the biggest Russian targets over the next couple of weeks as mud season draws in. So, for people aren't aware, this town was built to house the workers and everyone evacuated from, for those stalker fans out here, everyone who used to live in Pripyat, the workers at the power plant. This was the city that was built specifically to rehouse them. Uh, there, it appears that there wasn't any significant fighting that I've heard of today. The Russians essentially came into this town. Yeah, this isn't really a city; it's more of a town-sized area. And took the town today. The only real opposition was a large demonstration by the local civilian population. But following on to what the Russians have done elsewhere, was this just an industrial area? Yeah. So, for people who aren't aware, especially in the south and in other places, is the way the Russians are trying to deal with towns is the Western press and the Ukrainians initially said that basically the Russians abducted the mayor. The Russians very well might have detained the mayor for some point, but it's not the case that the mayor was just arbitrarily disappeared. So the Russians took the mayor, or the mayor went to them, and they had a negotiation, and essentially the mayor agreed to he negotiated the surrender, if you could even call that, of the town to the Russians. So, from my understanding, is the Russians have agreed, okay, let us go through the town, pick up any weapons, just make sure there's no Ukrainian army units in the town. Let us check the police station, let us check the local SBU bureau, and then we'll leave the town to your local administration. We'll have a checkpoint outside the town, but there will not be Russian troops quartered within the town. You just carry on as normal. The town will be left to your own administration. We'll bring food. And the mayor agreed to that. And he used that to essentially disperse and dispel the rallies that were held in the center of the town today. So essentially, yeah, the Russians took this without a fight, which I'm sure the Russians were happy to do that. And I haven't seen it confirmed, but it seems that the Ukrainian army just completely pulled back out of these villages and all the way back into the city itself. Now, the aspect to bring into why this is going to be crucial is the Russians, if they are going to sustain a long-term war, the Russians really want to turn this around and start with, instead of winning this war badly, start winning this war well. They need to start taking these cities they've besieged, and Chernigov could possibly be one of the main ones they need to take. So, just want to point out, you're looking at this. The main thing to note: look at the roads. The big thing about modern warfare in this war is you have to bear in mind the roads. So, as you can see, Chernigov has a lot of roads coming into it. Also, Chernigov is directly on the Dnieper River, holds bridges over the Dnieper River. From my understanding is the Russians might control this bridge, because from my understanding is there are Russian troops somewhere down here blocking off this main road. So I could be wrong on this, but this is what I've been on the assumption is basically Chernigov is besieged because there's Russians down here controlling this road. There are Ukrainians hold this area, but the problem is the rains are going to turn all these fields into bog and mud. And as you can see, these are open fields. There's a bit of wooded area, but Russians will spot if there's going to be trucks and stuff trying to cross these fields, and the trucks would likely get caught in the mud. And then not only that is once they get to the river, this a actual road bridge. I think that might be capable. Yeah, it looks like a road bridge. So yeah, I guess they could use that. But what if the Russians caught on that's how the Ukrainians are potentially supplying the city? You can bet that the Russians will probably just destroy that bridge and completely cut it off. And if the Ukrainians try and put up any kind of pontoon bridges across this river, the Russians will very quickly deal with that. So the bridge. Oh, where have I gone? So it's these two bridges that the Russians are interested in, if they are interested in bridges at all. So the Russians are able to eventually take Chernigov. It is going to be a very, very big thing in their favor, and it's going to cause a lot of problems for Ukraine. There's a lot of Ukrainian troops caught and bottled up in the city. If the Russians are able to work on it, sort of like they're doing in Mariupol, that's going to be a lot of losses for the Ukrainians. But also, again, it's the roads. So let's have a look. Thing to bear in mind is there are Russian troops round about this area to the east of Kiev. I think they probably shouldn't be there. I think it would be wiser for them to pull back to just work on these cities. But if you look, these roads, these long winding roads, this is their supply line. And they don't control these towns and these cities between the roads, this countryside. So they're constantly being hit by ambushes. And particularly for the Russian forces around here, their big problem is their supply line. This long, windy road that's open is constantly being ambushed along it. Also passes by Sumny. So the Ukrainians hold Sumny for now. It's besieged. So if we then look at supply lines coming in from Russia, so that is the border there, isn't it? Yes. So you have this one main road here. Got a smaller road here. I think I did this yesterday. Forgive me if you watched it, but 2-lane road there. I know this is probably very dry and you're all looking for more exciting, explosive content and stuff, but it needs to be said. But this looks like a 4-lane road. It transitions into a 2-lane road. But either way, these are the two roads that come in for Sumny Oblast to supply the Russian operations, not only in Sumny, but they're also supplying the entire effort towards the east of Kiev. This is not sustainable. If this road gets cut off, the Russian bridgehead here is in big trouble because it's going to be out of supply, reinforcement, and everything. So, and not only that, there's pressure on these roads. Only 2 roads that has to supply all this. So again, just consider the volume of vehicles and stuff that has to go down these 2 roads from Russia. And then they've got the problem. They can't stay on the main roads in Sumny. Sumny's held by the Ukrainians, so they have to go around the city. And I think this was a paved road whenever I looked at it, but as you can see, this is not a very big road. So you've got a decent road here, but then it has to transfer onto a very small road. And some of these roads aren't even paved, they're muddy. So this is a big problem that the Russians have to deal with. This is kind of the big mistake that their opening made. They've overextended, their supply lines are stretched, and it's open to attack in the rear by ambushes, all kinds of situations. So this is why there's a big emphasis on why the Ukrainians are holding on to these cities as long as they can to deny the roads to the Russians. So why is Chernigov a big thing? So if the Russians can take Chernigov, they secure these roads, these bridges. If you also look, this is a shorter route to apply these troops than this route from Russia here. So if they can just bring it in from Gomel, from Belarus, they can not only increase the advance of the Russian column out of here, they could possibly potentially just start linking up with the Russian bridgehead here, bring in another avenue of supply, get these troops back up to strength, get them a bit more mobile. Maybe that will open up a bit more plays for the Russians to do in weeks and months ahead. But ultimately, if I was a Russian commander, for example, my main concern would be actually clearing the country. And I think the Russians are starting to recognize it themselves. That's why they're going on the defensive posture up here, to a degree also around this sort of area. But in Chernigov, they're becoming very aggressive. So the other thing to consider is Spetsnaz has been very active. Russian Spetsnaz and special forces have been very active in and around Chernigov Oblast. I've seen footage coming out of them operating, especially in the forests. The Russians are sending them into the countryside and into the forests to hunt down and destroy Ukrainian army units in the forests, and they seem to be doing fairly efficient work at it. So that to me says that the Russians understand their problems and they're adapting to it, at least in the Chernigov area. With this play to take Slavutch, Spetsnaz operating, clearing the lines, securing stuff behind the lines, placating the civilian population to a degree where it's like, okay, look, we'll feed you, we'll not keep troops in your cities, administer yourself, don't be a problem. Placating the civilian population to a degree, that to me says that the Russians in Chernigov, this is going to be one of their main fronts. I'll get to the Donbass in a second, but because everything's really focused on this area at the moment. But this is kind of the second most important front that I can see that the Russians are starting to operate on. So this will be something to keep an eye on over the weeks, because if the Russians can't really make major moves elsewhere in the country because of the weather, they might as well just work on the cities in the meantime, get the cities sorted out. So whenever the summer sun comes and the land dries up, then maybe the Russians can restart their large armor advance and pushes along the highways and in the rest of the country. So also just another point that I would like to raise, because I also raised it yesterday, but I didn't really record it, so I feel a bit lax if I didn't bring it to some degree of attention. But
hello, and this is
so this is a guy that I followed a lot in 2014. He is very pro-Russian, very, very pro-Russian. But so take it for what it's worth. But he's done a couple of videos. He's in the Chernigov area that just sort of gives me an idea of how the Russians are dealing with the civilian population. So just to give you an example, this video here, this is a video of. So what I look for whenever I look at these interactions, this is kind of the autistic thing I'm focusing on, is the interaction between the Ukrainian people and the Russians to sort of get a sense of how they're acting. So you can see this is to the northeast of Chernigov, fairly close to the Russian border, but either way.
Gorsk, not too far from Gorodnya, all in the Chernigovskaya Oblast, the Chernigovskaya area in the north of Ukraine. Now what you're going to see is something in and of itself intrinsically quite simple, but also something that you can live to 1,000,000 years, believe me, and more, and you would never see anything like this, anything similar in the Western media, because this is what it is: truth, reality, sunshine.
So yeah, without I don't want to pilfer this guy's work. I'm not attempting to do that. I just want to give you a bit of a context of stuff he talks about. This is food distribution to the local population here. And whenever I watch this, there seems to be a fairly jovial, accommodating attitude between Russian soldiers and the local civilian population. So, you know, obviously civilians are going to act just because they're cordial to Russian soldiers to their face and stuff doesn't mean that they're not going to like them or anything. But either way, and it is just one video of one town, that granted. But either way, I've seen other stuff that helps build a pattern that sort of says how the Russians are going to deal with the civilians to keep them pacified to a degree. This video I found interesting, so just to give you context, this is a video that he made where Russian soldiers are present in the town, feeding the local population, and you can see the interactions between them. I'm not going to play the entire video, because again, I don't want to pilfer this guy's work. Like I say, that's his channel if you want to go and watch the full stuff himself. But this video here, he is in another town. Does he bring up a map of it? I don't think he does. But paraphrasing what he says for this video, essentially this town here, let's have a look. This town here, the Russian army came through it. The local mayor basically told him, look, we don't want you here. We don't want your food. We don't want your support. Go away. And the Russians were like, okay, just don't cause problems for us and we won't be back. So that to me, this is what Graham says is the situation in this town. But that to me says that, yeah, the Russians are essentially kind of in where they can. It's a live and let live sort of relationship. So maybe if the food situation in this town gets to such a stage where there is potentially a localized outbreak of famine, then if the mayor has to go back to the Russians and ask for food, you know, that's kind of puts it all in the Russians' favor. But the point I'm trying to get through from just these two videos, and I do know these are just two videos, but also the events in Slavutch today and what I've seen elsewhere in the country, pardon me, to me is outlining a sort of general policy that the Russians are doing to towards the areas they control, the civilian populations they control, in order to keep them pacified, keep them from making trouble, so that they can carry on the fight and do their work elsewhere. So that is what's happening in Chernigov behind the lines to a degree. And also, I'm trying to outline what will be happening essentially at the front lines whenever the Russians come take this city, because they have to take this city at some point. This was one of their, I know people don't like hearing day one objectives, but if there is such thing as a day one objective or day two objectives, Chernigov was one of them, and they still haven't achieved it. And like I say, just bear in mind the roads, the logistics. This is what an army moves on. This is what the Russians need to take if they are going to sustain the war and win it. So, I've kind of outlined a number of stuff, so I think I can sort of cotton down as much as I'm going to say on other places. But also Konotop, that is another city that is besieged, held by the Ukrainians. As you can see, major nexus of roads through this area of Ukraine. I'm not too sure the situation on this road. Is this the run I'm thinking of? Yeah, I believe the Ukrainians have reported that essentially they have retaken this entire road, is that they've cleared this road of Russians. So this southern supply route, from my understanding, relies purely on this single road. But there are Russians around Konotop. So if the Russians can eventually take that, that will open up these roads, make operations potentially to retake and reopen this supply line more sustainable, fan out into the countries, start clearing out this area, because this area especially seems to be a haven and a hotbed of Ukrainian resistance. Both army and militia are using this sort of countryside here to ambush Russians on this side, and also as a base to have cleared this. So that's something to keep an eye on in this area. And then I can remember. So other news: the Ukrainians yeah, I would say they have. In fact, I will prove it, because I know there was one guy who got very upset whenever I posted the claim in the chat. But the Ukrainians essentially have retaken this town. From my understanding, is they've always been fighting in this town, but the Ukrainians were relegated to the far suburbs of it. But it appears that from footage that has come out today, is that the Ukrainians have retaken at least the center of the town. So how can I corroborate that claim? I will show you how I will corroborate that claim. So if that guy who got especially angry at me for posting the claim and providing the video footage, this building, this is a very distinctive building. There is, yep, so that building, very distinctive. This World War II memorial, T-34, very distinctive. This building, the train station, has a very unique sort of architecture. This radio tower here, and I will bring this up where it was the post. So if the man who was very angry at me, this is why I made the claim. I don't, if I make claims and I'm wrong, I tend to correct them, or, I don't tend to make claims without a fair amount of evidence to back them up, or unless it sort of fits into a wider pattern of events. So here we go. I know not many people like Osenet Ukraine, but either way, what does that look like? There's the T-34 World War II memorial. That's the train station. That's the radio tower. This is buildings destroyed during fighting. This is makeshift defenses. Again, you need to see it to believe it. There you go. That's the train station. That's the radio tower. T-34 World War II memorial. These buildings here have been... oh, I hope that wasn't burned down. Yeah. There you go. This is a Russian MSTA. That building behind it looks very familiar, because that is that building there. And I believe that those buildings behind that wreck are these buildings here. I think that might be somewhere down around here, that particular picture. But these are Ukrainian soldiers. This is clearly a train station. I don't think I need to explain how it's a train station. That is going to be that train station up there. The architecture looks the same. I know most buildings look the same in the former USSR, because they were all built off the same plan, but there is a certain level of differentiation between them. Also, this has been repainted since the collapse of the USSR, but look, there you go. That scene there matches this. So the writing has been shot off the wall, but look, you can even look to corroborate the tiles on the roof match up. Blue, blue, skylights, skylights. So yeah, if that guy who got very upset for making that claim, I mean, I don't know what else to say. I whenever I made the claim and you got upset, like I didn't make the claim for nothing. I mean, I don't know what else you want me to do. Um, I guess yeah, the Ukrainians could have taken the footage 3 weeks ago or something, but the other thing is there's snow in these. No, in these. There was a lot of snow at least a couple weeks ago in Troisniets, in this area. There's no snow in this, so this is fairly recent. And that's Ukrainian uniform, that's Ukrainian pattern helmet. So, I mean, like I said, just to give you an idea of how my mindset works, I don't know, unless you want someone to physically live stream themselves walking up and down around here with a Ukrainian flag saying it's held by Ukraine. That to me is more than enough that I am willing to accept that the Ukrainians have essentially retaken this town. So that's the claim. Troisyanets now under Ukrainian control after a successive counterattack. And yeah, so if I hear more on it, I will post about it. But just the town does have a degree of strategic importance. Again, roads are always important, but it is not crucially important. But it is a bit of a loss for the Russians. But like I say, the main reason why I'm laboring this point is I just want to illustrate whenever people kick off at me because I'm making claims that can't be verified and stuff. Like if there is a claim, yeah, I can't verify every claim, but if there's a big claim like such and such city has been taken, or the Ukrainians have retaken this area, or the Russians are in this place, if the place is clearly identifiable from the video and the footage provided, I will go and try and have a look and try and corroborate it myself. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to give you my mentality, my mindset whenever I go into backing up certain claims. Smaller claims, if it's if there's an off the wall claim, it just sounds completely unrealistic. I wouldn't share that. But if there's a claim of like, yep, there's fighting here, there's fighting there, and I know there's fighting here and there's fighting there, and I don't recognize the footage, so it's not recycled footage, or it doesn't look, if there's video of like a rainforest in the background, well, yeah, that's not going to be Ukraine, is it? So, it's little things like that. I have to make short, quick judgment calls on what I see, be it footage, be it images, then what I choose to then forward into the group and then try and make an assessment how that fits into a wider picture. So again, like I say, my rambling here is mostly just to sort of give you an idea of why I make claims and how they can be corroborated to a degree whenever they can. So, but either way, that's one thing that's happened in this area south of Sumy is that the Ukrainians appear to have taken Troisnayets, and I would imagine the Russians will probably counterattack that at some point, but for the moment, that does appear to now be in Ukrainian hands. Sumy completely surrounded, completely besieged. Like I say, unless the Russians do something very stupid or something drastic happens, I expect over the next month and a half this is the time for the Russians to work on these sieges and Konotop, Sumy, Chernigov, to a degree Kharkov, but Kharkov isn't besieged. But work on these cities in this month and a half, try and deal with that. So once they're done, once they're controlled, summer comes, whatever's good for tank warfare, for the advances to begin, they can be reasonably what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry, I'm going to see now. They can be reasonably not concerned. I'm going to see now. The Russians can be okay that essentially their rear is now secure. Is that they're not going to, troops on the front aren't going to have concerns that they're not going to get food or water or fuel or munitions because they know their logistics supply lines are secure. Because one of the things is the Russian morale. Yeah, there is problems with Russian morale in places, but the one of the biggest reasons that will anger a soldier, that will sap the will of a soldier to fight, is if the soldier is concerned that he's going to be cut off, if he knows he's not going to get food. You know, if a soldier is essentially being told, "Look, you're going into battle, but also you might not get food from us or water from us or ammunition for the next 5 days." That is not going to be the best thing to tell soldiers while they're out in the pitch of battle in enemy territory. That's the kind of thing that would sap the morale and the dedication of your troops. So if the Russians can sort out this logistics problem, secure these roads, and their soldiers can be reasonably confident that they will get supplied, fed, watered, refueled when they need to be, that will help pick up the efficiency, the capability, and the morale of the Russian soldiers operating in northeastern Ukraine. But that is something that will probably have to come round about the summertime. So just before we go to the big story of what's happening, let's have a quick look at Kharkov. Again, I did this yesterday in the stream, but I didn't record it, so I'll just give a quick brief outline. So this is very close to Russia. And if there is any truth to the idea that Putin and the Russian government is sacking generals, you can be sure it will be the generals in charge of what's happening around here, because this by far has been the poorest, just abysmal performance from the Russians in this area. And it's to a degree in the opening days it was the conscripts, so to a degree it was the troops, but since the conscripts were pulled out, it is down to the commanders. I don't know what they're doing. Granted, I don't know the ins and outs of what is happening in this area, but this is pretty poor, what the Russians have achieved here. Like I say, Belgorod, this is one of the big Russian staging areas. There should be all kinds of logistics hubs already established along here. You've got, I think this is one that's actually quite a big road, isn't it? 2-lane road. Yeah, that's a 2-lane road. So fairly decent road there. Stretches off here. Is that a road there? Yeah, is that a railway? A railway? I think that might be a railway. Let's have a look. Yeah, that's a railway. So look, you've even got a railway here. So you've got a train station here, which the Russians control. So you could even bring in logistics via rail. And I believe there's a few smaller roads, but you've got this big road, and potentially you've also got this road here. How big is this? I don't think this is as big. Yeah, that's a 2-lane road. But either way, there's no real excuse to have logistics problems here. There really isn't, because like this is what 10 miles from the Russian border, and the Russians just are fumbling here. And the only thing I can work out is they just have really bad commanders on a battalion and divisional level. It's just so, for people who don't know, from my understanding, is the Russians kind of control this sort of rough area around here. So Kharkov isn't even besieged. So everywhere to the south and down here is still controlled by Ukraine. So they're still bringing in supplies, still bringing in reinforcements. So, like I say, if there is generals and stuff being sacked by Putin, these guys would have to be at the top of the list, because these are by far the poorest performing Russian forces so far that I have seen. So, why is Kharkov so important? Again, roads. Look at this road network around Kharkov. These road networks that come across the border. If the Russians are looking to push deeper into Ukraine, also this road here, as you can see, it's very specifically marked out into Dnipro and down by Poltava. This is a big road. This is a highway. I guess Americans would call it a freeway. 4-lane road. And then potentially you could even use this grass. I'm assuming that's a grass medium as well. So if the Russians could actually secure that road, they could put major troops, major supplies down that if they're going to make a push down on Poltava, onto Dnipro, into Zaporozhye, that kind of thing. So as I keep laboring the point, roads are key in this war, all down to logistics. fact that the Russians haven't been able to not even take the city, but even meaningfully encircle it is quite embarrassing. And I know people will say, "Oh, this is Michael's anti-Russian bias. This is his bias proving." Oh, like, I mean, how I'm willing to hear a counter argument. I mean, if someone can tell me how this is successful, what the Russians are doing here, how this is going well in any meaningful sense of the term, I'm all ears. Like, tell me, because I'm willing to be convinced one way or the other. But from what I've seen, this is very poor, the Russian effort around here. And not only that, I also believe that the Ukrainians have done a counterattack that has taken back some ground around this area, and I also believe they've made an effort somewhere around here. And like I say, this is like that's the border there. This is, what would that be? I don't drive, so I'm probably going to screw up. But I would imagine, what would that be? A 20-minute drive from Russia to Kharkov? I mean, like a month later. Like I say, if someone can put across an argument and tell me how this is 4D chess, or how the Russians are actually winning in this area, and what the strategy is that I don't see, I mean, I'm willing to be told it. But just going by what I've seen in the footage and events on the ground, I'm not seeing it here. Like I say, I'm not good, not good from the Russians there. But a bit down further south, it does get good news for the Russians, increasingly good news. So Izium's been taken. There's some debate if the Russians just hold everywhere north of the river, or if they've taken this southern part of the town itself. But essentially, the Russians have finally managed to secure the town, starting to cross the river. I believe there's also some pontoon bridges, but I think one of them is being alleged to have been hit by Ukrainian artillery, and the engineer battalion that was erecting it got quite badly mauled out of it. But essentially, yeah, the Ukrainian position in the Donbass, if we'll just go into the big story of what's going to be happening over the next couple of weeks, is starting to seriously come under threat. So I've seen some evidence that the Russians are starting to pull troops out of Mariupol and starting to deploy them potentially north or to the west. So if that is accurate, the Russians are considering Mariupol essentially done. They'll probably just leave it to the DNR and the Chechens to deal with what's left of the city, what's left of Azov and the Ukrainian troops in the city. But if it is accurate, I've not seen a lot to corroborate it. But if the Russians are indeed starting to pull their troops out of Mariupol, yeah, that to me would say that the Russians are it's done and dusted, and they are now redeploying their troops. Now, what I would expect the Russians to do, if they are doing this, and once the city properly falls, bring all their troops up, put them on this southern line in the Donbass, and try, weather permitting. Like I say, this is all going to be bog and mud. But if they can do it along the roads, or however they do it, try and make a push somewhere up into the rear of the Ukrainian forces in the Donbass. The Russians, through Izium, they're able to properly cross the river, because the other thing is the Donets. This is actually quite a fairly substantial river. As you can see, this is fairly wide. You need a bridge to cross this. You need a pontoon bridge to cross that. But if the Russians are able to secure proper bridgeheads on the other side of the river, get a bit more momentum, push down here, meet up with a hypothetical advance from the Mariupol forces, encircle all the Ukrainian army in here, especially around Kramatorsk. Where's Kramatorsk? Kramatorsk, Sloviansk. The reason why the Donbass is so important is, for people who aren't aware, there has been a war that's been fought on and off in the Donbass since 2014. So you have a lot of Ukrainian troops there, a lot of Ukrainian positions, supplies are all here because they've been dealing with they call it the anti-terror operation, but the war in the Donbass. So the strategic thing, which I think the Russians have done, is they've essentially told the Lugansk and the Donetsk armies, just, can you bog down the Ukrainian army? Don't allow them to fully retreat out of the area, keep them bogged down and fighting. We'll try and encircle them. Although the encirclement is taking far longer than I expected, but I think that's the play and the idea behind the utilization of the Donbass republics in this war is to bog down the bulk of the Ukrainian army in this area. So once the Russians are able to get a bit more bridgehead and momentum here, who knows, maybe they could push down this road and straight into the rear of Slovyansk. But I don't think that would be the wisest thing, especially with mud season, as the Russians have a fair bit of time to play with. Just try and encircle them all, and then just let this area wither on the vine. In a kind of not so much what they're doing in Mariupol because they've actually gone into the city, but in places like Sumny and to a degree Chernigov, just let them wither on the vine, pick off targets as you can, slowly encroach and encircle and tighten the noose and just wear them down. To such an extent, I seen a post where the Ukrainian army in Kramatorsk is enacted a very strict curfew. It is now illegal for civilians in the city to go outside and take any kind of photograph or video at all. I don't know what the penalties are, but I would imagine you'll probably, if you are caught doing that, is you will be, pardon me, you'll probably end up in the hands of the SBU, and probably with allegations that you are a Russian saboteur or something of that aspect. So the Ukrainians are heavily entrenching these two cities, from what I have seen, and especially if they're now putting in place special curfews where civilians are just forbidden from having phones out in public. Or I also believe that to a degree they are actually have a. I'll just try and bring up the post itself if I still have it. Yeah, here we go. So, granted, it's a Russian source, but so here you go. Ukrainian forces in Kramatorsk have established a strict curfew in the city. Photos and videos are forbidden. The city is bracing for the arrival of Russian forces to cross the Donets River. That's up there. And then this is me paraphrasing more or less what is said in this post. And this is from that Telegram account that I am pretty much convinced is operated or used to a degree by Russian military intelligence. So there is probably something to that. So this is going to be the big front. I think this is probably the sensible thing that the Russians should doing is be a bit more realistic in what they can do. These massive advances in the opening days were not really feasible, especially if they weren't able to take some of these cities. The logistics is the big thing that's hampered the Russians. So with what the Russians are now doing, essentially putting these guys mostly up in the north around Kiev, especially on defensive posture, just saying, look, go on the defensive. We're going to focus our offensive operations elsewhere. This to me says that the Russians are being a bit more realistic, a bit more level-headed in what they can do. And this is sensible because if the Russians can take out this area, secure the Donbass, major loss in Ukrainian men and material, major significant loss. Also, quite a lot of these men will be the most effective fighters of the Ukrainian army because these are the ones who have been in the Donbass for years fighting the war that's been going on there. So not only will you remove a significant bulk of the Ukrainian army from play, you will also free up significant amounts of Russian troops. I don't really expect Lugansk and Donetsk to sort of send their troops way out deep into Ukraine, but I would imagine they would probably support the Russian advance at least to the Dnieper. So you will free up all these forces. You'll add a massive political and symbolic victory to both republics because you can see the outline of the borders here. This is the oblast borders of Donetsk and Luhansk. The Russians are able to, if they achieve their territorial extent, that is, I don't want to say manifest destiny, but that is their territorial claims met. They will be very happy. And then, like I say, probably they will support the Russian advance onto the Dnieper. I don't think you're going to see DNR troops like going all the way to Kiev or something. But you free these troops up to act. Is that maybe a better thing for them to do? Would be to tell for the Russians to use these as auxiliaries behind the lines. The Russian army fights in the front. You use the militias, the Republic armies to help secure stuff behind the lines. That could be another aspect of what they're doing. But also, once they have secured this, it opens up a number of very interesting plays that the Russians could do. If I was the Russians, I will come to talk about the South in a bit more detail just after this. But if I was the Russians, I would imagine secure the Donbass, then go for Kharkov from the south. That to me would be the sensible play. Dnipro, Zaporozhye, not really crucial at the moment. Send these forces up, make a push along here, encircle Kharkov from the south. If this battle group doesn't like completely fuck up to the extent that the Ukrainians in Kharkov somehow like end up invading Russia, uh, properly encircle the city, take the city out of play. So Donbass phase 1, Kharkov phase 2. This is probably you're talking potentially 2 months, 3 months down the line. Secure that, move on to Poltava. If they're still fighting up here, just push up along it, just clear out essentially, yeah, just take Ukraine east of the Dnieper. Take these cities, encircle these cities from the east, uh, hollow out Ukraine east of the Dnieper. Maybe phase 3, 4, however, this could take us up until maybe midsummer, sometime around there, June, potentially even early July. That to me would be a more realistic timescale for the Russians to do stuff because I'm expecting them to do sort of 6 to 9 month potential war. At that point, if Ukraine is still willing to put up resistance and fight, okay, you lock down the east of the country to the east of the Dnieper. Depending on what these guys do down here, you could probably just then make a play for Odessa, transfer all your effective offensive forces down to the south, maybe make a play for Zaporozhye, or just if they still hold this bridgehead to the around Kherson, just unleash an offensive out there, push up the Kivarog, make another play for Nikolaev, just hollow out central Ukraine west of the Dnieper, fully encircle Dnipro, Zaporozhye, and then I guess at that point, I mean, if the Ukrainian government is still willing to resist, I mean, I mean, you're talking about more than half of the country would be gone then. So I guess at that point, I guess the Russians would just have to take out Odessa, approach Kiev from the south, take Kiev, and then at that point, if the Ukrainians still are want to fight on from there, then I guess the Russians are just going to have to go to the Polish border. But saying that, I am not expecting that to happen because there has been a very if you've been keeping. I've not been following him in depth. I've just been keeping of the abreast of the big announcements. But Zelensky and the Ukrainian position on negotiations has been shifting in the Russian favor. They're conceding more things. The two big things that Ukraine is finding it hard to reconcile is accepting the independence of Donetsk and Luhansk and the loss of Crimea. So that if they lose everything east of the Dnieper and the Russians are threatening to push in here, would that be enough for Zelensky to tap out and say, look, we're just not going to win this war. We just might as well cut our losses. But at that stage, you're talking like the Russians will have suffered quite a few casualties. This will be to take this area, if this is what the Russian new strategic plan is. This is quite a big effort, and it will be paid for in blood and in toil. So at that point, will the Russians decide, you know what, the original demands we met, they're not good enough for what we've paid. We're going to throw in another demand, which will then bring me here to the south. There's some very interesting things going on in Kherson Oblast. Very interesting things indeed. Not just in Kherson, it also goes up into, I think this is Zaporozhye. I think the Oblast is Zaporozhye, or is, let me just check. Zaporozhye, I believe it, yeah, Zaporozhye Oblast. So there's some very interesting things going on in these two oblasts. So Melitopol, I've been keeping an eye on it because the local mayor was quote unquote abducted by the Russians. Then he was handed over in a prisoner swap. The Russians put in a new mayor from the pro-Russian party opposition platform for life, a female mayor. She has been very, I wouldn't say pro-Russian. I don't want to stick her colors to the mast, but essentially she has been accommodating of the Russians. She's been telling the local citizens, that we have to accept where we are at the moment, and this is going to be the future for a while. So the Russians are in places where they need to. They are putting in people who are friendly to their administration. I also believe it was Melitopol as well, where the local mayor and the new local administration were actively recruiting citizens to act in fashion as sort of like a police force. And also, in fact, I just so I am not actually saying something that might be I might get caught out for on time, but I believe it was Melitopol, and I believe it was a police force that they were. Quick look, see if I can find the post. Oh well, that's something as well. Also in Melitopol is the Russians have also held a gun buyback. Um, Interestingly, in U.S. dollars, not in hryvnia or in rubles. Is a couple weeks back is that the Russians announced that they would buy every gun that a citizen comes in, especially guns that they were given as part of the militia by the Ukrainian government. Is that the Russians will give them $100 for. So that is another thing that's happened. There's been fairly substantial rallies as well in Melitopol. Let's see, where is the square? Town square. So I have an idea. Not too sure. Does it even have a square? Too sure. Yeah, this is it here. This is it here. So if anyone's just to give you an idea of where stuff is, all the videos and stuff I was putting up of the rallies and the anti-Russian soldier rallies in the food distributions the Russians were doing in Melitopol, it was here. This is the square here. So just to give you an idea. That's not the best footage for it. Okay, here we go. Well, I'll bring this up since it's handy here. So, Russia installed a new mayor in Melitopol after the previous one incited protests against him. Galina Dalinchenko has said that the city needs to adapt to its new reality, as well as announced by Russian television broadcasts have begun in the city. So now, Russian TV is operating in the city now. So is that solar panels? Sorry, my ADHD is getting confused. So Russian TV is now operating in the city. Could potentially be a sign that the Russians have long-term ambitions in Kherson and littoral Ukraine. Littoral in the sense of, if people don't know, sort of like near coastal regions. That's another term for a coastal region. So like littoral craft, stuff like that. So essentially Zaporozhye, Kherson, maybe if they ever take it, Nikolaev and Odessa, the Russians might have a bit of long-term ambitions there. So, just if I can find the specific post about the recruitment of... I can't particularly find it, but like I say, it did appear that the Russians were recruiting locals to form a sort of quasi-police force and staff the local administration. So also the other thing that's been happening here, especially in Chernigov, is the Russians are allowing the locals. Oh, it's smoke from the factory. No, that's not the. Yeah, there's this city, isn't it? Yeah. So the local civilian population, apart from people who obviously work at the. So this is a just a generic. I believe it's a coal-fired power plant, but also down. Where's the nuclear power plant? Same location. Yeah, so here's the nuclear reactors. So you have a nuclear, Europe's largest nuclear power plant. That's this here. This is where there was the fighting whenever they took the city. But this, I also believe, is just a generic sort of oil coal fire power plant. So major energy production for all of southern Ukraine and central Ukraine here. So apart from the employees physically required to keep these systems and the energy production flowing okay, the Russians are allowing the civilian population of in Erendogar, of the people who wish to leave, they are allowing them to freely leave and evacuate to Zaporozhye. So this town is this is held by the Russians. I'm not too sure of the specific conditions along this area, but from my understanding, essentially this is the limit of the Russian advance. is the Russians aren't pushing beyond it. This is where essentially this is the point of contact here. So I don't know if there is a sort of mutually agreed localized ceasefire here, but people who want to leave from Chernigov, Berdyansk, all the civilians who are evacuating out of Mariupol, they go to Berdyansk, then they go up to how would I pronounce that? Vasilivka. This is where they pass into Ukrainian held territory up to Zaporozhye, on into deeper Ukraine, and I guess if they're really minded to, then out into refugees into the rest of Europe. So the fact that the Russians are freely allowing civilians in areas they control to leave of their own accord, that tells me that yeah. How can I expand this point? I don't want to, because I don't want to use terms that have certain connotations with them. But if the Russians do have longer term ambitions on this area, the people who are going to be taking advantage of this ability to leave, these are the people who are going to be not very amenable to Russia. So after 2014, once Russia reclaimed Crimea, a lot of the lingering pro-Ukrainian population left back to Ukraine. There's been a small amount of people who have moved from Crimea from Russia, but essentially the demographic situation in Crimea is if you were to hold a referendum there today, is depending on what your views on the referendum back in 2014 were, if it was held by a fully free and fair referendum, you're probably talking 70-80% in favor of continued participation in Russia, because the pro-Ukrainian demographic that would have been resident in Crimea, that has largely gone back to Ukraine. In the Donbass, in the area held by the two republics, pro-Ukrainians, be it through persecution, be it just through political inclination, they have left back to Ukraine proper. Also, in general, across Ukraine since 2014, this to a degree, not in a large degree, but it does to a degree explain why Ukraine has become in elections progressively more anti-Russian, more pro-Russians and ethnic Russians in Ukraine proper have started to trickle back into Russia. So ethnic cleansing has too strong of a connotation for what I'm saying. It's not the right term for what's going on and what's happened in these areas. But if you sort of get my drift, is that the local populations here are making their own decision to essentially remove themselves from the territories that they don't like being administered by the powers they don't like. So this could be a play at what the Russians are doing here by allowing the local civilians to, because from outside of Sumni and stuff, because of the specific strategy being used on these areas, which I've explained in previous live streams, and I don't want to go into again. But in these towns up here that the Russians control, they're not talking about allowing the local populations here to just freely leave of their own accord. And it is particularly a big phenomenon in the south. And like I say, the people who are likely to take advantage of this, because some of them are actually going into Russia proper, some of the refugees, but the people who are likely to cross the lines back into Ukrainian held territory, you could probably just make an assessment that they're doing that because they're not especially pro-Russian. So if the Russians have an idea to set up Donetsk style pseudo republics in this area, if you can, I'll use the Maoist quote again, if you can drain the sea so the fish can't swim. So what does that quote mean? What did Mao mean whenever he meant that quote? So the sea is the people. And I know this isn't me, espousing my Maoist worldview, but the heart of the Maoist philosophy and the People's War and stuff like that is the sea. You have to view the people, the population, as the sea. Insurgents, fighters, rebels, people who will lead the revolution in Maoist theory, they are to be like fish. They are to be the fish within the sea. So they are to move seamlessly in the waters of the sea. So the idea is, if you can drain the population of people who would allow the fish to freely swim amongst them, if you can remove the segment of the population, allow them to go of their own accord, the people who are anti-Russian, that's going to be less people who will go on to potentially take up arms or resist the Russians in certain forms. but also if the Russians have longer term ambitions on this area, allowing the people who might cause problems and destabilize the hypothetical Kherson People's Republic, the Zaporozhye Republic, if the Russians do set up something like that down the line, they can remove the segment of the population that would be very against that. That could be something that the Russians are looking at doing, especially if the war goes on long enough and the Russians have to take essentially pretty much 3/4 of the country. I think the Russians at that point will be like, okay, the original demands are not going to cut it for the price we've paid. So Kiev, you're also going to give us Kherson and Zaporozhye. We're going to set up pseudo referendums. They're going to decide their own future, quote unquote. So that could be another strategic aspect of what the Russian long-term ambitions in Ukraine is. And it would also make good sense for the Russians in many ways, because one, if they take Zaporozhye and Kherson, that land bridge to Crimea is secured. You know, Crimea isn't an exclave of Russia outside, just connected by this bridge. Is now it is connected to Russia proper. Because essentially yes, the Russians want, so just to give an outline on that. So if these are set up as pseudo republics in the vein of Donetsk and Luhansk, they will not remain independent forever, because that isn't that Donetsk and Luhansk are not, and they were never intended, and they've never claimed that they will be independent states, you know, from here to eternity. The ambition for these two republics has always been accession to Russia. So if if they restore their natural borders, well, not their natural borders, but if they achieve their territorial borders and they set up a functioning government within there, give it 5-10 years, you will probably see that at some point a referendum or whatever will be held, and then these two oblasts will become the latest federal subjects of the Russian Federation. And this pushes this weak border of Russia further west. If there is pseudo republics set up here, you can bet that will probably be the same trajectory that they will be put on, especially if they can force a concession from Kiev at the point of military force to accept the loss of these two areas. So this might be airy-fairy hypotheticals. I'm just basing this off of little instances of what the Russians are doing in the area that seem to be part of a longer-term ambition they have. So take it for what you will, but it would make good sense for the Russians because, one, I'm sure this nuclear power plant is quite a big asset. If the Russians can secure that into a friendly-ish republic here, that will be a big asset. Crimea, let's see, is it easy to spot? Is that it there? Yep, this here, the Crimean Canal. Is that the Crimean Canal, or is that just a bank of... That is the canal, isn't it? But yeah, I guess it hasn't had water in it, so it's going to see if it shows where the blockage is. Yeah, so that is where the canal was dammed. So that has since been destroyed by the Russians. Water now freely moves through here. If Kherson becomes a friendly pseudo republic or eventually a member of the Russian Federation, that's the problem with the Crimean Canal sorted. Crimea will not have problems with water anymore. So that will be one of the big strategic aims of the Russians have been secured. So that's a hypothetical future scenario for what the Russians could be looking for if they have to essentially go far enough into Ukraine, fight far enough into Ukraine, spill enough blood where they feel that the original demands that they made of the Ukrainian government no longer qualify the cost that they've had to pay to extract them. And to wrap up this little spiel, what's happening here? The Russians have been pushed back quite significantly in the Nikolaev area. So I'm in two minds. I don't know if the Russians are just pulling their troops back of their own accord because they understand they're overextended. Maybe it's a bit of both, or is it the Ukrainian army physically pushing them back? But for people who are not fully aware, pardon me, the Russians came out of Kherson, enveloped Nikolaev from the east, started to push very far up the Bug River, and then the advance stalled, and I think that's whenever the logistics train just kind of petered out. And since then, they've progressively retreated, being pushed back, depending on your point of view, out of this area. So, from my understanding, is somewhere along there, sort of the point of contact between Nikolaev and Kherson. The other aspect is both of these cities are, what are we talking about? What are we talking about? Less than 10 miles? 10, 15, 20 miles. They are in artillery range of each other. So every night in 2 degree day, there has been artillery duels between these cities, between Russian held Kherson and Ukrainian held Nikolaev. They're firing rocket artillery and conventional shells at each other. So that's largely what seems to be going on there, to such an extent that here, the Kherson International Airport, where the Russian helicopters were hit, they were based here. They were hit by conventional Ukrainian artillery that came out of Lviv. So that's what's happening here. So, from my understanding, is the Ukrainians retook one of these two towns in the past week or so, and that's kind of where the point of contact is there. Then, on the other aspect, the Ukrainians retook this area because the Russians were pushing up quite close to Kiev. I don't know if the Russians are still minded to press this or if they might pull themselves back themselves. Because, like I say, that rain that came through today came through here. So maybe the Russians are making the assessment they cannot sustain this. This is just too risky. Pull back the Kherson, put up a defensive perimeter around Kherson, hold it, just keep this bridgehead till the summer, fight off the Ukrainians, let the Ukrainians retake this territory, let them throw themselves against the city, defend the city, and wait till summer until operations here are done, until the logistics problems are finished here. You want to specifically on the logistics problems in the south of Ukraine. I did do a YouTube video from a live stream I've done. It's up on the YouTube, it's up on the Odyssey, that goes in depth into Berdyansk, the logistics problems in southern Ukraine. So maybe that's an assessment the Russians are making here, is that it's just not feasible to sustain offensive operations, especially with the rains coming. Defensive posture, like what they're doing up in the north of Kiev, just form a defensive posture, ride it out, let the Ukrainians throw what they have against the city. Just hold this bridgehead. Maybe come summer, once elsewhere the situation is improved, logistics have been sorted out, maybe then we can start to think about going back on a more sustainable offensive campaign to try and reach Odessa, push into southern central Ukraine. That essentially phase 5, phase 4 of the Russian war offensive, if it comes to it. So, my manic spurging out and hypothesizing aside, I think that might be everything I was looking to immediately discuss. Um, Not really much new out of Mariupol. The Chechens, especially, pushing quite hard. The DNR is always pushing quite hard. It's slow, but they are making ground in the city. The civilian cost is increasing quite substantially on that point. It's in one of my previous streams. I'm not going to go over it entirely, but that what's happening in Mariupol explains why the Russians are mostly shelling Kharkov, Sumy, Chernigov, and not storming the city, because the street to street fighting in Mariupol is having a very brutal toll on the civilian population. Very, very bloody toll. So yeah, I'm not going to go over it entirely. If you want to see me explaining the Russian mindset behind their policy, their military strategy, behind kettling, Kessel, Kessel is the German term, but essentially kettling's a British police term. Encircling, pauldroning cities, and why they shell civilian areas in the way they do. That is in a previous stream. I recommend you go listen to that. I would like to imagine, if I've explained it well, you listen to my reasoning there, that will explain why the Russians weren't too keen to storm Mariupol, but the DNR and the Chechens forced their hands. and why there is such a bloody toll on the civilian population coming out of the city, and why the Russians haven't exactly stormed Kharkov. Well, they tried in the first couple days, but why they've not meaningfully tried to storm the other cities they've besieged, because there is a very specific strategy that the Russians are employing there. So, and on that point, I think that is everything, I guess, up to the point that I am looking to discuss at the moment. So, yeah, yeah, thank you for coming along.